Hello everyone, it's time for another 5 on Friday episode. Today I'm going to talk about 5 authors that I learned more about while I was on my trip to New England just recently. We were able to go and see the Orchard House, which is where Louisa May Alcott grew up. She actually spent much of her later years there, but this is where she did write Little Women. And so I wanted to do a shout out to her and to Little Women, which is one of my all-time favorite books. Many other people's favorites also, I know. That's had so many adaptations, and it's just a well-beloved book. And if you haven't read it yet, you should totally add it to the top of your list. I also was able to go and see where the Scarlet Letter was started. Nathaniel Hawthorne worked at the Customs House in Salem, Massachusetts, and this is where he started getting the idea for the Scarlet Letter. I also was able to see where he lived for a few years. It's where he started writing, and so the Scarlet Letter was to come later. I also was able to go see a house that Mark Twain built for himself after he made it big, and this house is in Hartford, Connecticut, and it is quite the impressive place. And this is where he wrote Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn and several other things up in what he called the billiards room, and a tiny little desk there. I mentioned the Old Manse. This is where Nathaniel Hawthorne lived in the beginning of his career, but Ralph Waldo Emerson also lived there and wrote a ton of his essays and other things. I don't think he actually wrote any novels or anything, but he wrote a lot of philosophical things, and we learned about the book Nature while we were there, which I have not read but am very intrigued by and hope to add to my list this coming year. And then finally we were able to visit Emily Dickinson's house, where she lived most of her entire life. She moved around in Amherst, Massachusetts, but she ended up living in this house at the end of her life and wrote all of her poems there. She started writing while she was there, and also on a tiny little desk. We were very impressed that most of these authors had just tiny little things that they wrote on, and we thought that was an interesting thing to learn. It was a great trip learning about all these different authors and seeing all these different places that they lived and wrote. I will have another video, a little more detail about some of the things we saw. I just want to highlight these 5 authors in particular that we learned about while we were on the trip. Also, I just wanted to shout out Melinda at Web of Stories, who is joining me in doing 5 on Fridays. She is doing her own categories. Be sure to check out her channel and see what she's been posting every Friday. And she is doing a fun thing where she tries to highlight the 5 books within 5 minutes. It's really fun. So be sure and check her out. If anybody else wants to participate and put up their own 5 recommendations every Friday, then we would love to have you join us. So stay tuned for next week for another edition of 5 on Friday.